Welcome to Bags Inside Out at the Victoria and Albert Museum. My name is Lucia Savi and I'm the curator of the exhibition. Bags are everyday items used both by men as well as women. They're everywhere. In our rush hour to work, we see them on the shoulders of people, on their hands, on the crook of their elbow. But although they're such an ubiquitous accessory and they play an important part in the fashion economy of major brands and fashion houses, they haven't been really looked at in depth in any exhibitions. So we really wanted with this show to look at the significance, the function, utility, symbolic meaning and making of bags throughout the centuries, from the 16th century till today, Elizabethan England to contemporary China. Bags are really dual objects. They're very private. We hold our most personal belongings in there, but also at the same time, they're very public. We carry them visibly on our body when we walk down the street, when we travel, when we commute. We're now in the first section of the exhibition, function and utility. Here we explore the reason why people across cultures and around the world have used bags. From their travel to the use in military settings, but also to carry official documents and the tools for their work and for their hobbies. One of the earliest objects in the exhibition is this burse used at the time of Elizabeth I. This burse is a beautiful example of Elizabethan embroidery, but is also a very functional object. The bag contained the silver matrix of the Great Seal of England. This seal was quite large and it was used to make seal wax impressions. This, as you can see here on display, were used to be attached to documents and proclamation and writs. It was like a stamp of approval, almost like a visual signature of the monarch's approval. What is also extraordinary about this object and about this display is the fact that for the first time we're displaying together the burse and the portrait miniature of one of Elizabeth I's keeper of the Great Seal. Here you see a portrait by Nicholas Hilliard of Christopher Hatton, one of Elizabeth I's keepers. And you see him standing, surrounded by the symbols of his power. And one of these symbols is actually the burse for the Great Seal, there on the table on his right. It's very tiny, but you can see how important for the portrait, for his status, this burse is. Handbags, where do they come from? When did women start using them? One of the exploration that this exhibition delves in is to look at some of the precursors of today's handbags. Women carried their belongings, a fan, an handkerchief, some sewing tools, in pockets that were ties at the waist and they were worn below layers of garments. Ties and pockets were popular with women earlier on, but as we reached the end of the 18th century and the silhouette of dresses started to become slimmer, ties and pockets start to become less popular and reticules start to appear. The reticules here on display behind me are a very good example of a type of container that women used for starting to use handbags. They were used at the late 18th century and were made of lightweight fabrics and silk especially, and they were kind of pouches with handles at the top that could be carried at women's side. So these little pouches with handles were used by women to carry a little object because they were quite lightweight, so they couldn't really bear the weight of many objects. They were really delicate, sometimes made of fabrics that were connected to the dresses themselves. And many of these reticules, also known as ridicules or indispensable, were made at home by women. Some of them they were decorated by women, and sometimes they were used as well as gifts. Bags have been used around the world by men and women to carry a variety of belongings, especially when pockets were not sewn into the garments. There was a need for extra containers to carry some very personal and precious belongings. This is the case, for instance, of the Japanese inro. Inros were worn at the waist, on the sash, by Japanese men when wearing a kimono. And they were used for a very specific purpose. They were used to carry medicines. They were like little pill boxes, and as you can see on the right, they open up and each compartment is sealed and can contain a different type of medicine. What is extraordinary about this object is the fact that it's one of the few surviving with an inscription inside the lid that tells us what medicine this man was carrying with him. Inros were used in the 18th century and later, but originally they were used for this function, to carry medicine, but later on they became much more symbolic, and they were used to showcase the status and identity of their wearer, and lost their function. Almost every sport, hobby or jobs required a specialized bag, and the content and the function, the purpose of the bag often influence and determine the bag's exterior and the bag's design. And this is the case here for a very specific type of bag. This is a despatch box. This one in particular was used by Winston Churchill in 1921 when he was Secretary of State of the Colonies. This very structured and sturdy bag, it's made out of wood and it's covered in leather. It was used to contain and to preserve and to keep safe confidential documents, and is still used nowadays by ministers. This was one of at least 7 boxes that Winston Churchill owned. This is because, of course, the amount of paperwork and documents that go in and out of his office, he needed more than one box. The lock is unpickable and is placed at the bottom of the box, while the handle is at the opposite side. This is another layer of security, because in this way it is impossible to forget to lock the box. The history of bags goes hand in hand with the history of travel. We do use different types of bags according to the different means of transport, but also the word handbag was initially used to indicate men travel luggage. Handbag for men were used in 19th century to describe large, sturdy leather hand luggage made with metal frame, lockable compartments, and pockets that were very practical when traveling and also very safe. But at the end of the 19th century, handbags started to lose the connection with utilitarian travel and were indeed associated with women. And here you have a selection of early types of handbags made for women. As you can see, they're like miniature version of a handheld luggage, and they're made with very fine leather and maintain some of the characteristics of the luggage: locks, keys, compartment, and also the idea that they were practical objects that women can use as they travel more and more outside the house. Bags have been used throughout history to carry our belongings when traveling, but also in moments of crisis. And here we have an object which comes from the collection of the Museum of Childhood. It's a luggage, and this luggage was carried by a child during World War II, Lionel Emsley. He was an evacuee and he had to move outside London to go to grammar school. And that's the luggage that he took with him when going to school. What's very poignant about this object is the fact that inside the lid there is a list of all the items Lionel would take and would need when going to school. It's a reminder of what bags are for, not only to carry items from an everyday outing, but also to move in a moment of difficulties.